everyone, and welcome to another edition of CFT Facebook Live. I'm going to be joined by another leader today, Mariah from the Nevada Federation of Teachers in Marin County, and that will be in a few moments. But first, I want to provide a few updates about the latest in the state of California and around education. I'm sure you've been seeing the discussions about schools reopening in person in the fall. As many schools in California open up in August, but coming this next school year. Whether the discussions are in your local communities, at the state level, and even they're talking about it at the federal level. I want to make sure our members know that CFT does not believe that we are ready to reopen schools for in-person instruction at this moment in California. On Monday, we sent a letter to the governor and the legislative leaders in both houses demanding that schools not be allowed to reopen in person unless certain conditions are met. You can find that letter on our CFT.org website. But the conditions that we believe that need to be in place are five. We have five conditions that we need to be met, or five pillars, as you might say. And these are aligned with the AFT pillars to safely reopen schools. The first is in-person instruction at schools must be prohibited until the number of new cases continues to decline for 14 consecutive days, both statewide and in our local communities. That's a requirement we think before any discussion about reopening schools. We need a declining of new cases of COVID in both the state and our local communities, and many consider that counties. That's the first requirement. The second is we need to make sure we have the infrastructure and resources to test, trace, and isolate new cases in our schools, and that must be the testing must be regular for our students and our staff, and provided by the state. The state must ensure that if we have in-person instruction, that we are testing our students and our staff on a regular basis, and that we can trace any new cases if that occurs. So that needs to be in place before we consider reopening. The state, number three, is the state must deploy the public health tools that prevent the virus's spread and align them with education strategies that meet the needs of the students. This includes that the state provides sufficient personal protective equipment for students and staff, and that the local education agencies, often that's the term for our school districts, have the necessary resources for adequate social distancing, including enforcement, adequate disinfection, and adequate ventilation of our school sites and our classrooms. That's the third thing we need in place. The fourth thing is there has to be involvement of parents, workers, unions, community stakeholders, students, all in the planning, and this is essential. This includes the requirement that exclusive employee representatives, unions, must sign off on all working conditions through the established collective bargaining process. We want to make sure that we're not only getting the proper PPE, personal protective equipment, the cleaning supplies, that we're also applying those things in the proper way, and it is the proper personal protective equipment that we're getting. So that is the fourth, stakeholders and collective bargaining. And finally, the state must provide proper funding, adequate funding in education in order for our schools to reopen. Right now, they're funding flatline. That is not enough. There is more cost to reopening in person, also reopening hybrid models, or continuing remote learning. The costs are much more than in a normal situation. More money is needed, and those are the five parts that we have called for the governor and the legislature to have before they reopen schools in the state of California. Again, the reducing consecutive 14 days in the state and counties, the infrastructure for testing, tracing, and isolation in our schools, the PPE and proper direction for social distancing in our schools, the stakeholder involvement of parents, workers, unions, all community stakeholders, and finally the proper education funding that we need. Those are the 5 things we have in place. We all know school employees really want to be back with students, and that's why they work in our schools. And parents want their children to be taught in person as well. But we also know that everyone also wants the safest environment to be able to do so. And until that safety can be provided, most parents, students, and school employees believe remote learning is the best way for now. That's what we've been demanding. That's what we've been asking for. Today, the governor took steps towards putting more restrictions in place, more direction on school reopening. And while we don't believe his guidance goes far enough, it is a start towards what CFT and other education unions are demanding. He announced today that schools can reopen once their county has been off the monitoring list for 14 consecutive days. So if a county's on that monitoring list, they cannot reopen. And they have to be off that list for the last 14 days. He's required that masks be required for all staff and teachers, and for students grades 3 and older. So masks are required for all students. Masks are also strongly recommended for face coverings of some type for students in grades 2 and lower. There is scientific evidence behind that. 3, staff must maintain 6 feet of distance with each other in between themselves and students. Schools will perform symptoms checks. Schools must have hand washing stations, appropriate sanitation and disinfection places, and there must be quarantine protocols for those that have symptoms or if they have discovered they are positive. Next, there will be a requirement to test staff regularly in a cohort model, and the state will prioritize that contract tracing system for schools, and that testing will be provided by the school site. The next is quality distance learning will be prioritized, and teachers are expected to have daily live interactions with students that must include challenging assignments and work appropriate for students who are English language learners or have special ed needs. And the last of the guidance and direction was he also laid out a process for when schools and districts will be required to close if they were open based on when cohorts of students or several cohorts of students have tested positive. And so those are the guidances that he put out. We will be putting a summary of that on our website, as well as the direct links to the governor's proposals. Obviously, we will continue to unpack this and look deeper into this. We'll put it out there for our members to make, and we will still be fighting for the most safe conditions for our school communities, and importantly, for all stakeholders at the local level to be involved in all of these critical decisions. The governor said that these guidelines apply to both public and private K-12 schools in the state. He also indicated today that he is working on plans for higher education reopening guidelines. So we will be sure to engage with him on those pieces and keep you informed as well. One final update I want to give before we talk to our guest today is regarding federal funding for coronavirus relief. CFT, along with our national affiliate, the AFT, has been advocating for substantial federal funding to invest in state and local governments as our country grapples with rising cases and the relief efforts that must follow. We are hearing that a bill will be introduced next week in the Senate, providing as much as $1.3 trillion in relief. And this is what we've been asking for since May, since the last package, the CARES Act. We will continue to advocate for a speedy passage of a relief bill, and we'll be calling on you to reach out to our senators here in California, as well as urging your families and friends who live in other states to call their senators. Without significant relief from the federal government, California, along with every other state, will not be able to do the kind of robust recovery effort that we know is needed, and the robust education that we know our students are hungry for, our students and parents are hungry for. And also remember that the state budget has triggers based on this passing, so we need this. Now remember, this is part of our 3-point plan to help our schools and communities safely and adequately get funding. First, schools and communities first. Now, Prop 15 is on the ballot in November. The second is the federal funding, which we just talked about. It's going to be introduced next week, asking you to call your senators, as well as senators outside the state. And the third is a billionaire's tax, what we've talked multiple times here, that we're asking our state legislators to act on and pass before they recess. Those are the 3-point plan to help fund our schools. So with that, after today's update, really want to get to our special guest today. Mariah Fisher from the Nevada Federation of Teachers is here with us today. She's a new local leader, and she has taken the reins of her local at a challenging time, as we all are aware, particularly because Marin County their current position before the governor's announcement today on reopening schools, which we'll get to in a moment. So let's get to that. First of all, Mariah, thank you for joining us today, and thank you for your advocacy and your work within AFT, CFT, and your local community. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. I just, before we begin, just tell us a little bit about yourself and your local, where you are, and, Nevada Federation of Teachers.
Absolutely. So my name's Mariah Fisher. I'm the president of Nevada Federation of Teachers. I teach drama at San Jose Middle School here in Nevada. I've taught middle school and high school in Nevada for 13 years. This is my 17th year of teaching. Prior to Nevada, I taught at Calistoga Junior Senior High School in Napa County. I'm also a parent of 3 amazing children here in Nevada. I have 2 in middle school and 1 starting high school this year.
That's awesome. Thank you. And it's a long time for teaching, especially in drama. Math teacher, different world.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about what's happening in Marin County around reopening schools and the coalition that you've helped build.
Yeah, so we started talking with Mary Jane Burke, who's the superintendent of Marin County Schools, in June. A bunch of local union leaders, she reached out to us, wanted to start communicating with us about what reentry is going to look like. She started sharing her vision around guidelines of how Marin County schools should open. The emphasis was that all schools should have all students on campus 5 days a week, with 4 feet social distance, and that instruction would start in person on August 20th.
Wow.
In addition to discussing with her, we started discussing with each other, and we just felt like our concerns weren't being heard and our questions weren't being answered. And a lot of the questions were just unanswerable. We don't know yet. And we felt from there we needed to start to collaborate countywide. So through that frustration, we began discussing and reaching out to other Marin County local leaders, and we created the Marin Educators for Safe Schools Coalition. It's a coalition unifying the voice of all 18 school districts here in Marin County. Some locals have been a part of the planning process in their district, and some have not been invited to the planning table. And having this team to collaborate with has truly been empowering. We celebrate together, we sympathize with each other, and we share updates weekly on how things are going with our locals. And I will tell you, it's the most I have felt unified as a county in my entire teaching career. I really believe that all educators in Marin are fighting for all students and staff in Marin right now, and it's really, really motivating. The Marin Educators for Safe Schools Coalition has a Facebook page, means we're official, right? And I see it really becoming a long-lasting part of education in Marin, and I hope we continue this collaboration well past the pandemic.
That's amazing. I mean, there's a lot of organizing that goes into that, outreach to other locals, talking to your members, talking to their members. What kind of success have you found from this organizing effort? What can you explain? What more can you explain about the success you've been seeing?
Yeah, I think we are seeing success. 2 days ago, there was a press release countywide that pressed the pause button on reopening all over the county. And until that release, each district seems to be kind of flailing in their own ideas of a reentry plan. And this really brought a county vision that we as locals had really seen a need for. It was released the day before our first coalition action, and I think they felt the pressure we were putting on them in the lead up to the action. We had become unified countywide, and it was time for school districts really to do the same. And our action was yesterday. It was a car caravan that ended at the Marin County Office of Education, where we held a press conference sharing both our true undeniable love for our profession and for our students. We are just dying to get back into that classroom with our students, but we have clear concerns regarding safety, and ultimately we're responsible for the safety of our students when they're with us. And I felt it was highly successful. The energy was invigorating, and I feel like the community really is supporting us right now.
That's amazing, and I saw parts of that on Facebook. It was kind of a Facebook rally. That's great. Kind of, how are things going in your own district, and what do your members need? What are they asking for in terms of assistance? And I know some things may have changed, overnight with the governor's announcement today, but what are some things that you're looking at with your district and your members?
Well, we've had an incredible amount of support locally from our parents. I feel like the parents see how much we love our students and how much we love what we do, and they're engaged, and we need them to continue to be engaged. We go into our second round of negotiations on Monday, and I have no idea how it's going to go. They're ready to dismantle our elementary music and PE programs. They're pushing for cohorts of 25 to 30. So the announcement that we're reopening virtually has given us some direction. It's given us some focus that we needed so we can start planning, but we still have a lot of work to do. At the press conference yesterday, I shared that teachers are incredible problem solvers. Regardless of what content or what grade level we teach how to solve problems. And I really believe that in order to open in a way that is sustainable, it's a math problem, and small cohorts will offer the best results. And that idea of starting slow to go fast, in many ways, I think it's as simple as that, to begin to talk about how reentry is going to work. 25 to 30 children in a room who really have spent the last few months pretty isolated is not going to yield the results that we're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And a lot of this work is through that coalition that you've developed in your county. So what might be the next steps for your union and or the coalition, and what advice would you have for other fellow educators and school workers?
I think the engagement that I've seen from all stakeholders in this moment right now is really exciting. I would, as far as advice, I would reach out to local districts. I think the stronger the voice, the louder the voice. And, everyone just needs to stay really engaged, to read, to comment, to support and collaborate. These are all the ways that I think we're going to get through this the safest way possible. And, public education, it has to become a priority in our state, and it's not. And, this could be a moment where we really turn it around, and our kids deserve it. That's the bottom line.
Absolutely. Anything else you'd like to add to the CFT members before wrapping up today?
No, I just want to thank all of the CTF staff CFT staff, that has supported our coalition. And, I'm wrapping up my first year as a local president, and I had no idea that I would feel so supported by CFT. I feel like there are people a phone call away when I need to talk to someone, or an email away, and you know, it's just been a key part of getting me through this wild year. So I really appreciate it, and thank you so much for having me on today.
Oh no, thank you. Thank you for joining us today, and especially thank you for the work you're doing for your teachers, for the students, for the community. It's an amazing advocacy that you're doing all around. So thank you. Thank you for all of that.
Thanks a lot.
Take care. So as we close today, I want to thank all of you for joining me once again. I know that times are stressful and scary and uncertain, but I also know we are stronger together, and that the work we are doing as a union has been and continues to be so critical as we head towards the start of a new school year, and fight to make sure that we have a safe and healthy experience for everyone, for the students, for the school workers, and for our communities. We have much to fight for and to advocate for. So thank you for joining us today. I want to say stay safe, be good, and have a great weekend. Take care.